Merry Meet, Annie here. This is another video on This Witch's Way, and this time I am talking about familiars. What I'm going to share is my experience of having a familiar. And specifically, in my tradition, I was taught that we would eventually have a familiar in our life. We couldn't go in search of one. It wasn't like you go in search of a spirit guide or a totem or an animal spirit outside of this world. It was rather that at some points in our life, animals will make themselves known to us as allies, as partners. And I have now had two in my life. I have gone periods without a familiar. In fact, the early years of my life, probably the first 15 years that I practiced witchcraft, I did not have a familiar. Oh, that doesn't mean I didn't love animals and have wonderful animals in my life. But an animal hadn't made itself, hadn't presented itself, hadn't introduced itself as my working partner. And then I did have my first familiar. And that was Emmett. Emmett has been gone now for, I guess it's been 3 years. Now, he was in my life for 16 years. He was a bit of a different familiar. He was part Doberman and part Pit Bull, and never growled once in his entire life. And he was a huge boy. He was a 90-pound dog, and people would come in the house and take one look at him and be not so sure, and before they knew it, he had this way that he would sit next to someone, and he'd wait until he felt that their energy had relaxed, and then he'd lay his big old head in their lap. And then even those who weren't dog people, and weren't big dog people, would find themselves, without knowing it, scratching his head and looking into his eyes. And he was a very, very powerful presence in this world, and everyone who knew Emmett loved him, and everyone who was around him sensed that there was something different about him. And I was partnered with him intimately for the 16 years he was in my life. And he made it very clear in the first year of his life that it was more than that. And also he was more than that to those who met him in this life. So what is a familiar? It's not your pet. Sometimes a familiar is not even an animal that lives in your household. For a while there was a dove who lived in my backyard. Now, we have a lot of doves, so it's not at all an unusual thing. But one dove seemed to always make itself present when I was out back, and would come and sit near me and have entire conversations with me in coo language. And that was indeed, for the period of time, it was probably a couple of years. I remember the first time he was gone, or she was gone, in all honesty. I don't know if it was a boy or a girl dove. I remember how much I missed it when it was gone. But we have the question then from people who are new to the path, well then what is a familiar? Because as I said, it's not a pet. We love our animals. We love the animals that share our life. We love the animals that we meet outdoors and who make themselves known to us in so many ways. And that is not what a familiar is in the traditional sense. A familiar is an animal that makes themselves known to you as a working partner, as someone who attends you in your magics and your spell work, who may or may not join you in circle. Some keep it to the intimate level, and some actually show up for circle. Emmett showed up for circle. He always knew when circle was being cast, and he would just come and lay his big old body down in the middle of it. Our relationship to our familiar becomes known to us in a few steps. The first thing is, of course, we adore them and we appreciate their animalness. We appreciate the part they play in our life, sometimes the mundane part that they play in our lives. And then there becomes a moment in our exchange of energy with them that we will be petting them or holding them, and for a while it's not just that we are watching them, but we begin to understand what it is like to be them, and to walk the world as them, to be the beast that they are. And that is at their permission. It is not that we go in search of it. So we get to a place where, in contact with the animal, we are feeling their animal selves. And then the next stage is we actually begin to experience the world from their point of view. We can walk the world as them, experience it as them. And again, it is at their permission. We cannot have this happen. We cannot make this happen from our direction of the energy. The energy is an invitation to be one with them. And what we take from that, the learning that we take from that, is that the animal that we know as friend, as partner, as familiar, is the lesson for us in living in more than one world at the same time. We share in their beastliness and understanding their viewpoint of the world, which in our complicated human relationship to the world, we don't often see that kind of, or feel that intimate of a bond with the natural energies of the world, with the earthliness of the world. Our familiar is very much an animal of earth completely, with a sense of where they fit in the world and how they feel the world. And the more we align with them and know what the world sees, what the world looks like and tastes like and smells, and what it feels like to be furry and walking on 4 feet or 2 feet if you're familiar as a bird, or just feeling the completeness of being at ease in the world, our world. But at the same time, our animal partners are creatures of instinct and a knowing that doesn't require knowledge and facts and learning things from others the way we all assimilate information and knowledge. They're creatures of pure instinct, and the instinct is seen in the pagan world as coming from another place, as an inspiration outside of the earthliness that we and our animals share. So the familiar is a creature of this world and also a creature of the other for us. I love the word that is used for familiars as attendant spirits. I really like that description of what a familiar is. They share their wisdom with us, they share their experience with us. And while I never want to underestimate the power of every animal friend that we have in our life, familiars are few and far between. And you know it when you've met your first one. Now, Emmett passed away, and I assumed there would never be another familiar in my life. He literally died in my arms. Excuse me. And now that I put myself together a little bit, as you can tell, the power of that relationship is such that that's how deeply and intimately you are connected. Now, Emmett has been gone now for a few years, and in fact, right to the end, he was an unbelievable spiritual partner. He came to me when he was dying, let me know that the end had come, and I laid down on the floor with him and held him as he passed, literally feeling, especially that poignant moment which I will never forget, between his last breath and his last heartbeat. One of the most deeply moving spiritual experiences of my life. To the very end, he brought me experiences beyond what I could ever have had without his partnership in my life. Our relationship was so intimate that I assumed there would never be another familiar for me. It was so complete. It was so complete with the people he met that I assumed it would never happen again. And it did happen again. It just goes to show you never know. Years went by and I was not in any way even searching for... I think before Emmett I had actually been keen on finding an attendant spirit, and so I kept aware of the animals in my life and the animals outside to see who might present themselves to me. And after Emmett's passing, though, I didn't do that anymore because I had had that experience and it was so complete I just wasn't looking for it again. But like I said, familiars choose you, you do not choose them. And this strange beastie announced himself not too awfully long ago as my new familiar. Now, he is a little bit different, as you can see. He's he looks like a goblin or a gnome. But let me tell you how Ernie introduced himself to me. He'd been in the house for a while, so it wasn't like he made himself known right from the beginning like Emmett did. But Ernie has a challenge in life. He is epileptic. And when he is on the verge of a seizure, he seeks me out and wants to lay with me. And over time, as those seizures would happen, he began letting me in to experience them with him. And I was grateful for that opportunity because that way I can do some energy work with him and help the seizures pass. But in the experience of that, which was him intentionally opening up to me in trust, he began to present himself as a partner. Now he's a bit of a different partner because he's a much more independent spirit than Emmett was. Emmett was the kind of companion that was always by your side, and Ernie is a bulldog with a bulldog personality. But as you can see, all I had to do was sit down on the couch today and I have him. And I don't just have him in the sense that he's joined me on the couch and is with me as my pet. But as I hold him and feel him, I can be truly living in his skin and experiencing what it is like for him. And in fact, if I'm not careful because he's dozing, if I let that go too far, I also would feel like falling asleep. So what are our familiars to us? As we were taught, the traditional idea of what a familiar is, he is very much in this world, and I experience this world totally through his existence and how he lives in it as beast. And he also is a creature of pure instinct and really an ancient knowing. And he literally walks in the real world and the instinctual world at the same time, which is what our magics are all about. And there's another very interesting thing that I have discovered. I had been told this, but of course had not experienced it because Emmett has been my familiar for a very long time. That very often when a familiar has passed over, they will make themselves known to you in a new way, through a new animal, through a new companion spirit. Emmett, when he left totally. I have had other pets that when they passed, they existed in the house for a while and came back to see me and showed up at Samhain. Emmett was like, Emmett has left the building, and he was so gone, and it was difficult for me because I assumed he'd have some presence after his death like my other pets had had, especially since we had this special relationship, but no, he was just totally gone. But I've been told by a former priestess that our energy, the energy that we create, the bond between us and our familiar actually becomes an entity of its own, which lives on the etheric level. Bogey? No. And that energy is in search of, almost like a magnetic pull, a recreation of that energy on the physical plane again. And I have discovered that indeed she was correct, because while Ernie is uniquely himself in the way he lends energy and the way he behaves with me and who he is partnering with me, he has, without ever having met Emmett, developed some interesting habits which mimic Emmett's completely. And I really am intrigued by the explanation that my priestess had offered, which is very much like when we're in circle and we create all this together, create an entity that's a little bit beyond and above the circle. In other words, the sum of our parts is greater than, and it exists as an entity. Is there is also the relationship between a witch and their familiar creates an entity, an energy, which is the sum of the two of them, and then something beyond that. And that never dissipates, never goes away, and always lives at the etheric. And when you think of the etheric level, you think of energy that attracts itself to other energies that are similar. And so it does make some sense that when Ernie and I created whatever Ernie and I are together, that becomes the energetic twin of ourselves at the energetic level, that it attracted the energies that had once been my partnership with Emmett here on this world. And it has been interesting to see Ernie develop some of the behaviors that Emmett had. Our relationships with our familiars complete us as humans. They remind us who we are as the animal, which is human. They remind us to trust our deepest instincts and our knowing. The knowing that doesn't require intentional thought to figure something out. The knowing that something just is. And they teach us about energy at these different levels. They teach us about absolute trust. They're opening themselves up to us and permitting us to experience the world as they feel it and sense it and know it is a gift. So that's what I wanted to share, especially as Ernie has made himself such a presence in my life recently of what our animal familiars and what our companion spirits might be as we walk this world together. From Ray Part, from Annie, and from Ernie, I wish you all mirth and reverence.